I was listening to somebody's audio book of Elliot Rogers' journal just because it came up on YouTube. I like looking at, serial killers and and fucked up people on the internet and stuff. But something I noticed did resonate with me, which was Elliot's view of the world as either just or unjust. So when the journal first starts off, he finds the world unjust because he says, I'm a human and I deserve to be fulfilled, and yet I'm not fulfilled. And I don't know why, and I don't know how. And, according to the way that he had put it, it looked like it was just random chance. Or either that or every single person should be given fulfillment somehow. Or the earning of that fulfillment is something that is unknown to Elliot, because he doesn't ever talk about, like, I'm going to go talk to a girl tomorrow. He always says, a girl didn't talk to me. So, but he always finds the world to be unjust. And so I think that's really the seed of what it was that made me feel like there was no purpose in life. And I remember going down a really dark path also, to the point where I started hating existence itself for existing. And I think that is a huge problem in the future, and even now, is that so many people believe that the world is not just, and they can't really define why. It's usually something like, well, somebody else got something that I wanted and I didn't get it. But it doesn't, they don't ever seem to say, I tried to do what they did and failed. It's that they didn't even know that much. So they just thought that, like I had said, it was like random chance, or that everybody's just supposed to be given something. But that transformational method of actually attaining the thing that they want is always missing. And usually they don't ask questions about that. They ask questions about the outcome, but they don't ask questions about the method. So part of that, I think, has to deal with faith in their own success, which has to deal with faith about the way that the world works. If they believe that the world works in a way that doesn't make sense, that is arbitrary and unjustifiable, then how are they ever going to be able to predict what they do in it is going to matter? Because it's sort of like you get this weird broken remote where sometimes if you press a button, it does X, changes the channel, something like that. And then you press the same button and the volume gets changed, or the TV turns off, or something like that. And eventually you start losing faith in the remote. You just don't want to use it. So that's what it is with them. And it has something to do with the external locus of control, definitely. But beyond that, it has a distinct absence of focus on methodology. It seems to focus its sole attention on the effect or the outcome, rather than the cause. And so they find the world unjust because of effects, and they focus on the effects that they've had in the past and the effects that they want in the future, irregardless of the cause. And that, I think, is what leads them to evil and hopelessness and nihilism, is because the external locus of control is a big factor, but also their nihilism, their consequentialism, their utilitarianism, and frankly, their hedonism, that they should just be given something, or that they should take something at all costs without regard to other people. because they don't see those people as deserving, or because they don't care because everybody gets the same random chance, or because the world is externally, like oppressive and you can't really do anything about it anyway. So if you do happen to succeed, then it's not even, your fault, because the system just gave it to you by chance, kind of like winning the lottery, which Elliot Rodger played, which I thought was weird. Like, why would you play the lottery? No one ever wins the lottery. Why would you bother doing that? That's stupid. Go and get a job, or like save your money and invest it or something. He wasn't stupid. So, I mean, he could have done that. He could have invested. But like I said, he's not focused on that. He's focused on, well, other people have what I want and I don't have it. And other people have what I don't want and I don't have it. And it's just like repetitious over and over and over again. And it's like, well, if I just quit thinking about it, then it'll just, magically fix itself. And, because of the law of attraction, if I just keep thinking positively that I'm going to win, then I'll just win. And it's like, well, kind of. I mean, that's where it starts. You do have to have that to begin with. Yeah. You have to believe that you can succeed in order to succeed. But it isn't just that. It isn't just believing in yourself and that's it. And I found that quite telling, that he did believe that he believed that simply by raw, pure emotive force that it would just gravitate toward him, that it would magically manifest itself because he wished for it so deeply. And it's like, that is so telling. I mean, that right there is why he didn't have the success that he wanted with women, is because you, in that state, would necessarily treat the other person, the woman, as an object, because you can't understand, that they're going to have their own independence. They're not going to just gravitate towards you because you have this force of nature or something behind you. There's a process, right? So you have to, if you're going to fill yourself with these positive thoughts, which is good, that's definitely the baseline of what is necessary. And he said he felt better after he did that, which I don't disbelieve. I mean, that sounds sensible to me. But then he doesn't take it any further. He just does that over and over and over and over and over. And then he goes, well, never mind. It doesn't work because it didn't get me what I wanted. And I was like, how strange. Why would this person just sit there and do nothing but think these thoughts over and over and over and over and over like mad? Really, really, really try. According to his journal, he did this all day long, every day for fucking weeks. And it's like, okay, I mean, that's damn good effort, but you put it in all the wrong places. You just put it in, it's sort of like if a person just bought a whole bunch of ingredients to make a cake, and then they thought that, okay, well, if I just amass this giant truckload of ingredients, that somehow I'll be drowning in cakes. And it's like, no, you have to mix them together and put them in the oven and bake them for a while and take them out and put them on the, plate and all that stuff. So why, though, I think is a very interesting question to ask. Why did Elliot Rodger not ever think about that methodology? And I think what it is if somebody gets stuck in theory too much and they don't socialize with other people, then maybe they view the world as being more magical, because socialization is arbitrary. It doesn't have a logical validity behind it. There is no reason why people should go out for coffee instead of chocolate, or why they should eat pizza instead of spaghetti. Why is it that kids always want pizza? Well, I don't know, because I guess they keep getting told that that's what they should want. I don't know, but that's what they do. They didn't always do that, but now they do. And so it's things like that. Why is that the case? Why is it that back in ancient Rome, bisexuality was far more prevalent in the male population and not so prevalent at all in the female population? And now in the United States and in the Western world, as they say, there is rampant bisexuality on the female side, but not so much on the male side. So it's reversed. And why is that? And, so it is admittedly arbitrary. There's not really a way of being able to predict. If I knew what the past was, would I be able to predict the future? No, because the socialization of people just kind of randomly arbitrates throughout history. It doesn't have any rhyme or reason. It's not like a car that that came from a horse and buggy, and that came from a horse, and that came from shoes, walking around in moccasins, which came around from walking on 2 feet, which was I guess, somehow better than walking on four. And so, that's just that's something that you could linearly derive, and you could say, okay, I can follow that rationally. I can follow the evolution of walking to building shoes to taming horses to building horses and buggies to building cars. I can follow that line of reasoning pretty rationally. I can't do the same thing with culture. Why is it that some people worshipped the storms more than they worshipped volcanoes? Well, they happen to live near a stormy area, maybe, and that explains, part of it. Why is it that they then chose to be more agrarian in cases where they had a monotheistic God versus polytheistic or something like that? These types of questions don't really have rationale behind them. And so if somebody gets lost in their head for a long time, if they excel in school, but they don't excel in social relations with other humans or their peers or whatever, then that's going to lead them to an isolated life where they fixate mostly on academic stuff, and they tend to use rationale as their system of saying this is just and this is unjust, etc. So when a person that focuses on rationale looks at society, they see madness because it isn't rational. It isn't rationally disseminated. It's not like the government views sex as a resource that's essential to survival and then automatically redistributes. I guess you'd consider them to be prostitutes or something like that. Or maybe more like, what is that? What was that movie? Logan's Run. Maybe Elliot Rodgers expected it to be more like Logan's Run, where you just press the button on the little platform, and then whoever, whichever chick that wants to fuck that day, who also pressed the button, appears. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, all this did was just match made us by saying, you're a consenting person that fits these requirements, and I'm a consenting person that fits your requirements, and so then we can be compatible. And so then it just skips through all of the flirting and all that stuff and gets right to the point, or the end of it anyway. And I guess that's how he viewed it. And like I said, that would be the most rational way, I guess, of engaging in casual recreational intercourse. But it isn't that way now. And so then, like I said, somebody that looks at the world like a rational machine would expect Logan's Run, but then get introduced to this culture where they have to know the arbitrary memes and the arbitrary expectations of the culture and abide by that, or else they don't get laid. And what an arbitrary, unjust system, right? Because it's not rational. So now I can kind of walk around in his shoes a bit, and I can see the same types of things that I used to say is, I notice all these effects, and I wish that I had them, and why don't I have them? I am so intelligent, blah, 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 blah. And he does the same thing. And then now, as I've gotten older, I can look back on that and I can say, okay, now I can understand why that was the case, is because the culture simply just doesn't abide by rationale. There is no rationale applied to the culture. And there shouldn't be, because the culture is necessarily subjective, and subjectivity should not be beholden to relativity. Relativity is beholden to subjectivity. Relativity only exists as a consequence or an extension of subjectivity. Subjectivity reigns supreme. So when I recognized that was when I was started on the right path, and I finally fixed that issue, is that you can't put relativity before subjectivity. You can't expect that the rules that apply to logic and rationale are the same rules that apply to humans. Because if you do that, you're going to turn them into, at the very least, relations. Like, you must relate to me in this way, a role, a trope, basically, at best, or an object at worst. it sounded to me more like he didn't really objectify women. I think that he just turned them into, like I said, roles. Like, you're a sexually active female that is genetically superior to the average female, and so then we should mate. That was his mindset, and that's a role. He's defining the women in terms of how they relate to him, or how they relate to each other, or their boyfriend, or whatever it is. Because he didn't really bring up lesbians too much, but how the females relate to others and him. And so he thought, well, if this really is rational, then my genetics should speak for themselves. My intellect should speak for itself. My social status should speak for itself, etc. So these roles that he had figured out were as far as he had gotten. Now, if he went further and he realized that there is actually a person beneath that role, and that he shouldn't try to turn himself into a role, because he used to do that too. In his journal, he writes over and over, like, this is who I am, or this is how I'm treated, or this is my lot in life, and all this. And it's like, no, that's just a role. That's not who you are. That's a reduction. And that's why it's so painful, is because it isn't actually you. It is just as painful for them when you do it to them as it is to do it to yourself. When you say to them that all they are is blah, 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 this role, a jock, a meathead, a servant, a peasant, or whatever it is, then they're not going to operate according to that. They're not that. They're a person. So likewise, when he says it to himself, it's equally damning, and he feels the pain and the agony of that. And then when he doesn't do it to himself, then he doesn't feel that. And so it's like, okay, well, then there you go. So the whole thing, the problem that he had and the same problem that I had, is believing that for some reason rationality, logical validity should reign supreme in all matters, regardless of whether it's subjective. People that you're talking about, cultures, etc., should all be rendered rationally. And it's like, no, Elliot, you can't do that, because how, for example, give me a method that you would rationalize a culture. Give me an example of a rational culture. And then you could say, okay, well, what about Logan's Run? Well, the backlash from that is you don't develop any emotional connection to this person, and you're owned by the state. And then you could be like, well, that's, better than what I have now. But it's not the best. It's not the best thing that you could come up with. It's just better than what you have now. And the only reason that it's better than what you have now is because it's simpler and it's idealized. It's some hypothetical future utopic state. It's not a real life, complex, weird, jittery thing. It's a solid, integrated, idealized concept abstraction that you could come up with as a hypothetical. And hypotheticals are always more simple than actualities. Whatever you hypothesize is the case is always simpler than what actually is happening. So the problems, I think, that led him down that path is, first of all, the external locus of control. When he changed that, that's when he started to brighten up, and he started to sound more positive. He started to sound like he was feeling better and being more productive. And I remember doing that too, and it worked for me too. But then you have to go further than that. And you have to realize that it's not rational to rationalize everything, because there's things that are inherently and intrinsically irrational, and they should be irrational, like love that he keeps mentioning. That's irrational. So why should it be distributed rationally if it's an irrational thing? You see? So it's something to deal with a miscategorization of what the raw fundamental platform upon which we use to measure everything else should be. That platform should not be logic and rationale. The platform should be intuitive, subjective artistry, religion even, but certainly not, and mysticism, stuff like that, but certainly not science or logic, because that turns a person into a machine. And we are not machines. We can't be predicted like that. We can't fit into that kind of a mold. It's too cookie cutter, and it'll just end up cutting off, our toes and our fingers and things like that. We're not built for that kind of thing. We can't do that. We can't fit into that kind of a mold. And when you try to force someone into that mold, like Eliot did, including himself, then you fail and you end up in pain and agony, either giving it or taking it. But either way, you're not going to be fulfilled because you're treating people as if they're machines. You're making an error. And not only is it an error, but it's a fundamental error. It's an error in everything that you do because you're a person. Everything that you do is going to deal with people, at the very least yourself, because you're a person. So everything that you do is now subjective because you're a subject. And if you're doing it, then it makes it subjective at its most fundamental base level. So you have to have that mentality first. It's an internal locus of control, but it's definitely bolstered by subjectivity as reigning supreme. Everything ultimately goes back to the subject. That's the only thing that you get to hold on to after death is your subject. Everything else is let go. You have to let go of your life. You have to let go of your body. You have to let go of your mind and open everything. And then you can succeed. But it's like they say in that song by Incubus, you have to be okay to sink in order to swim. And that's true. And you're not gonna be able to get that through rationale, because rationality is not enough to explain the complexities of the world, of reality, and certainly not enough to explain people. So the fundamental problem is when I viewed, and I believe when he viewed, justice as being equivalent to logical validity, to logic. Like it needs to be logical or else it won't be just. And that's just simply not the case. There are just things that happen that are illogical, and there are unjust things that happen that are logical. For example, look at the way that corporations run. They run on logic. They don't care about people at all. And they're responsible for some of the greatest evils of this world. They'll sell ammunition to both sides of world wars. They will sell children into sex slavery because it makes money. And that's the rational thing to do. It's not ethical, and it certainly isn't subjectively valuable, but it certainly is logical to make as much money as you can possibly make by increasing your output for money. So you get as many kids sold into sex slavery as you can, because logically that's how you would get more money. And that's what you see happen. And so you can't use logic as the sole measure of what is just, because corporations are logical and they commit injustice after injustice. And if you leave them to their own devices, they always do. Corporations are sick and evil at their base. They have to be reined in by laws in order to get them to stop being unjust. Otherwise, they're unjust by nature.